So we're going to start today from the very bottom. Oh, maybe not the very bottom. I don't want to spend my time working on or beating too many beginning chess players. So we'll start our battle with Oliver, and his very brief bio is Oliver enjoys playing chess. Bud gets confused when there are lots of tactics. He wants to keep things simple, so you might want to mix things up against him. I specialize in keeping the game complicated, so this will be interesting. Challenge, no help at all. And we'll even give him the pleasure of playing the first move. Keeping it simple, my expectation is that he probably plays the queen's pawn opening because you get more control in the opening. I think it was predicted d4 and the knight f3 were the moves that gave you the most control, but we'll still overpower him because he is rated 550. He starts off with e4, so let's play. No funny business, all right. This is a good first move. He probably should have did queen pawn because of his style. We're gonna go with the French. This looks simple. I like it. I'm having a really good time playing chess with you. Oh, that is thankful. I could play c5 and turn the game into an e6 Sicilian, but no. I'm not going to change my style just to counter his own. I'm going to play naturally. e6, d5. Then knight to c3. We're going to go with knight to f6. The two knights. Then only good square to place the knight would be d7. Putting pressure on the e5 pawn, which is an advantage for white. So to try and undermine that advantage, we need to remove its defender. That's the d4 pawn, because then it would be much easier to maximize the pressure against the e pawn. So we're going to start with the move c5. After c5 he takes. We could recapture back, but that would be too easy. If I had to recapture any one of those pawns, it would be the e5 pawn, because the e5 pawn is the stronger pawn. C pawn is really doubled and too easy to recover. So we're going to go with knight to c6, putting pressure on e5. After the move h3, we got to give our opponent the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he is based on he is Oliver. Even though he's a computer, we'll assume that Oliver still possesses a logical mind, and there's something behind every move that he plays. So why he could have played h3, honestly, I have no idea. Maybe he wants to play g4. But he doesn't want to play g4 because he thinks that if he pushes the pawn to g4, that the g4 pawn will be unprotected and therefore vulnerable to attack. So maybe the whole goal behind him playing h3 is so he can play h3 g4. It still doesn't really make, or isn't efficient. Another purpose behind h3 could be, and this of course is far-fetched, but it could be to give his king a flight square in the event that he is attacked along the back rank. Very far-fetched, because I'm not in any position to attack him along the first rank. So those could be his logical reasons behind playing h3, but they are a little bit it's just fearful play on his part. So we're going to recapture the e5 pawn. That was our intent, and it's probably best that we recapture it with the weakest knight. So we're going to go knight d takes e5. The real weakness or threat that I have to deal with is him generating some sort of pressure on the e pawn or the e file, while also having pressure on my d5 pawn. He plays bishop b5, and a lot of the French positions, the French bishop, the c8 bishop is a big liability. So by playing bishop to b5, he almost encourages me to play the move bishop to d7. Now, if there were a drawback, I think it would be that it blocks my protection over d5, but he doesn't have any pressure on the e file, so I think I can get away with this. So bishop d7, he takes, probably queen takes. If the knight comes under attack, the knight can always come back to c6. Or if I play bishop d7 and he takes, I can take back with the knight, which pretty much ensures that I will be able to pick up this c pawn. And so, unless he plays the move b4, then it will be a much harder job. I could play knight to c6 or knight to d7, but both of those moves look unproductive for my knight. So I will settle with bishop to d7. He recaptures, and we're going to capture back with the queen, because the queen at least adds a slight bit more value to my position than taking the knight from e5 back to d7. So we'll play queen takes. Now if he plays b4, I might end up playing the move a5 and undermining it, but he goes for the safe approach and he castles his king, which would be a very good idea on my part. So I think I can do this. I can play the move bishop takes on c5. I expect that he responds with rook to e1. My bishop can come back to d6 to protect my knight, or my knight can move. If my knight moves, then that would allow him to take on d5, because my e-pawn would be pinned and I'd have only the queen to recapture with, and I'd be losing pretty bad after queen takes on d5. That is a problem. So if I take on c5, he plays rook e1, and I play bishop to d6, he might put a bit more pressure on e5 with bishop f4. Then I would go knight to g6. He would take bishop, queen would take, and again, he would take on d5. Is that the end of the world? I mean, at the end of the rainbow, it would be 6 pawns versus 6. And I gave up a really good pawn too. So takes on c5, I feel like I need to find something better. Rook e1. The knight can't move. Could I play bishop or pawn to e5, or bishop to d6, pawn to e5, or bishop d6, bishop f4, pawn to f6, takes, bishop takes, and f4 will follow with bishop takes knight. I feel it works. So I'm going to go with bishop takes on c5, rook e1, bishop to d6. Then bishop f4 will be met with f6, unless there's some tactical shot of takes, pawn takes or bishop takes, rook takes, or queen h5, g6, takes on e5, and I castle. No problems. So let's go with bishop takes pawn. Unexpected. He missed out on an opportunity to improve his rook while also creating a problem against my unprotected knight on e5. The purpose behind a4 could either be to prepare a rook lift, bringing the rook probably into the game along the 4th rank, or it could be to outpost his knight on b5. Maybe he might even consider playing the move a5, a6, trading off for the pawn on b7, and opening the file against my isolated a7 pawn. However, that won't work as he plans, because the moment he plays a6, I can very easily play b6 to keep the file closed, and even look towards overpowering that pawn later in the game, since it will be very difficult to protect, and he may not have the material to protect it. So, that being said, I'm not afraid of the move a4. Instead, I will ignore this move and castle my king and remove the threats. Knight e2. Another confusing move. Now, what might confuse many chess players is what direction I should go to maximize my advantage. Currently, my advantage is the d pawn, the e pawn, which give me better control over the center. I also have a development advantage, and I have a little pressure on his f2 pawn. I don't think the f2 pawn is significant enough, but I think the development of my central advantage will be key. Will be the key to winning this chess game. So maybe I want to make this pawn a bit more significant by playing the move d4, but maybe his whole purpose behind playing knight e2 was to stop the pawn's further advance with the move c3. If that's the case, then maybe this should suggest that I play the move d3 or d4 right now. And then I might be able to meet the move c3 by pushing it further to d3. And that could be a bigger problem. I think I was my options here were either putting a rook on the e or d file, or now playing the move d4, which I think appears to be more objective than the other options. Although I ran into a potential problem: tactics. If I were to play the move d4, he could attack me with b4, which could drive my bishop away from the protection of the d pawn. But that does not work, because if I were to take the b pawn and he were to take eventually with the knight, I could take my bishop from b4 to c3 and fork the rook and the knight on d4. So I should not be afraid of that. That being said, good luck solving this one, Oliver. He goes with bishop to g5. We'll assume that there's logic behind that. Maybe his idea behind playing bishop g5 is to prevent one of my rooks from coming to d8. Very thoughtful, very thoughtful. I can always block him with the move f6, but I think we'll save that move for when it's more essential. So what I'm going to do, I'm planning on getting my knight out of the way so I can further advance my center pawns. Now, the first move that would come to my mind, which would seem the most natural, is knight to c6, protecting my d4 pawn while also getting out of the way of the e pawn. Now, the more aggressive option might be knight to c4, does the same thing or similar things, but also attacks the b2 pawn. If I were to play knight to c4, he would probably play b3, and then I would be forced to come back to b6, which is a square I do not want to place my knight. Unless I could bring that knight eventually to d5, and maybe later f4. We have to move a lot of material, enemy material, out of the way to make way for f4, which could then be useful pressuring the king. If that were the case, if my whole goal was to play knight to f4, then you could even make an argument that knight to g6 might be more appropriate, since the knight may have the option of coming to f4 or h4, which both do similar things. I'm at a loss right now. So, you know what? I'm gonna keep that option. I'm gonna keep that option open. I'm gonna play f6 first. I'm still thinking about where my knight could be better placed. So maybe dropping it to, or playing f6 first might be the better option. Keep my options available. After bishop f4, which aims to take my knight off the board and leave me with doubled e-pawns, I'm pretty much forced to make a decision with my knight. Now the big decision is whether I want to go to g6, which seems to pick up a tempo, attacking the bishop, and if I'm really lucky, I could get g6, bishop h2, or bishop g3, and then play the move e5, which sort of traps the bishop in. However, he'll probably follow, which he can't actually. He can't follow with f4 yet. He would probably follow with king to h1, and then prepare the move f4, so that he can begin opening that diagonal for his bishop, and also breaking down my pawn center. It's a pretty nice idea. I can go to c4, b3, knight g6, or b6. I don't want to put my knight there, it just looks too weird. So we're going to go with the tempo gainer, knight g6. Oliver is putting up some serious resistance right now. He goes g3, as I expected. I mean, I also thought that he might play bishop to d2 to prepare the move b4. So we'll block off. We could block off his bishop. His bishop is not causing us any problems right now. Now, if we play a move like rook a to d8, and he plays f4, that might punish us for not playing f4 right now, or e5 right now. Because then, if he keeps a pawn in again, he can't play that because I have the move d3. But we can encourage it. Let's encourage it. Now, which rook would I want to place on the d file? Probably the f rook, because the a rook could be placed on the c file to target the c2 pawn. So we're going to go with rook f to d8. All right, this is a joke. This game is a complete joke. What, was this a mouse slip or something? No, this couldn't possibly be a mouse slip. Oliver has just disrespected me with an awful move. This move completely defies logic. What? Does he have to go to the restroom and just needed to make a move? Does he have something to eat, or does he just not feel like playing anymore and would rather just lose really quickly? You and your confusing tactics got to me. What is the logic? Okay, so I got to him, confusing tactics, was just playing positional chess, and he decided that because my confusing tactics had gotten to him, he should play bishop to e5. Maybe his goal behind bishop to e5 is that if I take it, I at least get doubled pawns. So he probably intends on me taking it only with the f pawn. And he wasn't, but this actually is natural of someone who is rated 550, that they have sort of tunnel vision when they're coming up with when they're calculating their ideas. They only think what they would like to happen, against what will actually happen. So I could see that, although trading off a bishop for double pawns really does not help his cause. But to make matters worse for him, I'm actually going to take back with the knight so that he really gets nothing for this exchange. And now, when it rains, it pours, because he willingly fell into that discovery attack. My queen's protected now by both the knight and the rook, so I don't have to fear losing my queen to me not recognizing a pin. So this is pretty easy right now. Just play d3 and pick up another piece. I thought I was about to show you guys a collaborative work of art, but unfortunately, Oliver wants no part of that. Let's get this knight. And the best part, or the best path forward from here, you have an extra knight, you have an extra bishop, and it's an e pawn versus a c pawn. The best square for the knight would probably be on f4, which would maximize or put a lot of pressure on the king. However, that might interfere with the dark square bishop's ability to cover key squares surrounding the king. I don't know. Maybe I should go with bishop to d6. But if I go bishop to d6 for the discovery attack, most likely he's going to play king to h1, and eventually I'm going to try and make my e-pawn less of a problem by pushing the pawn to e5, and the result of that contradicts the value of my bishop along this diagonal. So maybe there's no point in doing that either. Maybe the best idea for me is trying to lay claim to the second rank. Playing a move like queen to d2 attacks both the queen, puts pressure on c2. If he takes, that's probably the best case scenario for me. But more likely, if I play queen to d2, he's going to take his queen and bring it to b5. That would still, okay, it may not win me material, but it's productive. I mean, it seems kind of lame to go from queen to d2 to b4 to hold everything together and try and force the queens off the board, because it doesn't seem like a very ambitious goal. Then if I were to play knight to g6, I'm sure he would play pawn to f4 in response. I could focus on pressuring that pawn, maybe with bishop to d6. He's going to play g3. And I can be happy that I'm getting him to push pawns in front of his king. I think that's pretty logical as well. I'm going to go for that. Also, logic, if I have so much firepower to hit his king with, I probably want to keep it on the board. So playing a move like queen to d2 might make the game a lot easier for me, but it might also unnecessarily extend its length. So we're going to go with knight to g6. Go ahead. He goes g3. And we're going to target the g3 pawn. Or maybe force the queens off the board. He opened up the second rank, so he could force the queens off the board. I mean, if I play queen to d2 and he takes, that would certainly give me an extra pawn, but more likely he's going to play rook a to d1. Or f to e1. I mean, a to e1 or f to e1. And the queens are going to come off. But that could also be a contradiction to what I was trying to do, or the complexity I was trying to maintain. Okay. We'll go with bishop to d6. Keep the position complex and try and maximize pressure. Rook to a3. I see his logic. He wasn't really concerned with what my bishop could do in response to rook a3. All he was concerned with was getting his rook into the game. Maybe he, the concept in his mind, rook lift, started screaming at him before he decided that he actually can rook lift and maybe challenge my queen by bringing his rook to d3. Unfortunately for him, he was not paying attention to my ability to take that rook out of the game with a3. He moved to a square that was covered by a weaker piece. Very natural for a 550. So we're going to punish him for that. We're going to take. And then we're going to take our most inefficient piece. I was thinking about taking on a4, but that pawn is extremely weak, whereas my e-pawn could potentially be an advantage for me. I was thinking about taking it and letting him take on e6 and playing king h8, but that does not seem necessary. I could also play e5, but that seems pretty slow for the material advantage I have. So I'm going to go with rook ac8, put pressure on f2, then maybe I can make threats of taking on a4 and playing rook takes on c2. Okay. He has fed me, he has simplified the game, pretty much what he was looking for. He wanted a simple game, but this one is coming at too big of a cost, too great a cost for him. So we're going to take that rook. We know that he might take it back, yes. Without a queen, you can't make so many threats. He's right. But unfortunately for him, a rook or two rooks and a knight are good enough to make threats. So rook takes. And we're going to try and finish this game as quickly as possible. I was thinking about taking the c-pawn, but what I'm really looking forward to is checkmating him right after I take the c-pawn. So what we're going to do is play rook to d2, which will force him to the first rank. And then when we take on c3, the threat of rook to c1 cannot be stopped. It was a nice game, Mr. Oliver, but you've got a lot of work to do.